Hi, hello. Thank you for clicking on the Truthful Ministry podcast. I'm here today with Matthew. Matthew, I believe this is episode number 4, yes. Matthew, I've wanted to have on here for a while. I think I've mentioned his name a few times. Matthew is currently the worship pastor here at our church. He is a book reader. He is a cracked Valorant player. He's a homebody. He's a fantastic singer and musician. He grew up a pastor's kid, and he's genuinely one of the best friends that I have in the world, man. So glad to have you finally on here. I've been talking about it for a while. I knew from the jump when I started this that you were going to be one of my guests.
Yeah.
So kind of the first question I asked everybody is just how did we meet? How did you and I get to know each other?
Dude, so we met each other in college. You've had Carson on here, right?
Yes.
So I met Carson my freshman year, and Carson was basically like my best friend off rip. And then Carson was on the soccer team. You were also on the team with him. And so because I was hanging out with Carson a bunch, you also started hanging out with him a bit. We were all involved in campus ministries. And so we just got to know each other a little bit more. And then I think we actually started hanging out once I found out that you played D&D. And I was like, yo, you want to play in a game with me? And you were like, sure.
I definitely remember seeing you wearing a D&D shirt one day, or maybe it was D&D socks.
Yeah.
At a campus ministries event. And I just happened to be like, yo, I do D&D things sometimes. I had never played in person, but I was like, I want to. And you were like, well, we're starting something. And I was like, sure. So that was definitely the beginning. And from there, it just grew. But that was early 2019. So it's been a while.
That was so long ago.
It's been a while. But we just kind of got closer from there. Yeah. I don't think it's one of those things too where it was just natural. You don't sit down and you're like, we're going to be really good friends now. We're going to be best friends. And 4 years from now, we're going to work at the same church. It just happens.
Yeah.
Just through D&D and through other stuff.
We were just involved in all of the same stuff too.
Yeah.
So we just got to hang out more.
We got to see each other a lot more. But next question, I've asked Carson this as well, but what's one thing you would go back and tell freshman in college Matthew? So going back to that first time that we were playing D&D, that era, if you could go back in time, what would you tell Matthew?
Babyface Matthew and... you sent me these questions, and so I've thought about it a bit. And low-key, I genuinely think I would tell him it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know if you remember, but there is a solid, I didn't learn how to say no to people until, halfway through my senior year of college. Mm-hmm. And so people would be like, hey, can you come and do this for us on Tuesday night? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. And then someone else would be like, hey, Tuesday night, we need you to come lead worship for us. And I'd be like, yeah, what time? And I just couldn't tell people no. And it got to a point where there were so many people who wanted me or needed me for something. And I'm an introvert, which is weird because I'm going into ministry. But all these people would just be like, oh, I need you. And so I would just shut out and shut down and then just recluse inside my room, and it was not good for any parties involved. So, but yeah, telling people no, it's hard to learn. A lot harder than you think.
Yeah, and it's not just just jobs or volunteer work. It's even friends.
Family.
Friends, hey, your family asks you to be here. Your friends ask you to be here and hang out. It's just a combination of everything, and you have all that on your plate. You can't, the popular phrase is you can't give 100% to 50 different things, because then you'd end up giving 2% to everything rather than 100% to one thing.
And that's not fair to, everyone involved, honestly.
Yeah. So, on the same note, thinking about freshman year, Matthew, just thinking about where you were then to maybe kind of where you are either now or maybe more so toward the end of college, but just where was your faith at the beginning, and how has your faith changed, or how has your faith grown?
My faith was pretty strong. I just, the strongest I think my faith has, ever been, which is weird to think of it as, in the past your faith was, the strongest, but it's, when I was deep in the valley was, when, my faith, I feel was the strongest, and, since then, I've been going uphill, and not that, I still don't retain that, but it's, I know it was so strong because it kept me down there, you know what I'm saying? But freshman year, I had just gotten out of a college that I didn't like. I didn't really have any friends. I didn't know anyone because I had moved halfway through high school.
Yeah.
And I moved in a wheelchair, which is a story on its own. And so I really didn't make any friends in college. I just kind of secluded myself, and taught myself guitar, and that's how I fell in love with worship music. And then So like college Matthew, I'm stepping out. I came in as a worship intern, just freshman year. Our campus minister was like, "Hey, we want you to be the guy," and I was like, "I don't know how this works, but all right." Yeah. And I think it was pretty strong, but the thing that I lacked with my faith was accountability, and I can't stress enough how important accountability is. Like I said, I met Carson like off-rip freshman year of college, and like having this is like a church term, but like a brother in Christ, like legitimately.
Yeah.
Like Carson as someone who is like not just oh yeah, I go to church Christian, but like no, I'm bringing my Bible, we're studying, we have these conversations, these theological discussions, like someone who keeps me in check, and that I also have the permission to keep him in check, Once you have that in your life, it's like totally different. I heard the sermon one time that was like, in your faith walk, you always need to have 3 people. Someone who's ahead of you in their faith, who can mentor you, and like who can be just like a guide and a spiritual guide to you. And secondly, you need someone to walk with you. And then third, you need someone who you can be a leader for.
Yeah.
So like you have those 3 things, and then if everyone else has those 3 things, you're constantly creating a chain of people with those 3 things. So like in college, we get to college, and once I met you, like I feel like you were spiritually, like theologically more mature than me, and so like I felt like I had you, and also our campus minister that I could come to with like questions like, what does this mean, or what is this? And as far as like walking with someone, I felt like Carson and I were in the same boat, like as far as like where we were in our spiritual journeys, and then having people to lead, like I had a worship team on campus that I led. I had I think this was before you were at our church, but like there were a couple of guys at the church who like really looked up to me and that would come to me for things like that. And so I felt like I had those 3 in abundance, if that makes sense. So
dude, I think about that like rule, I guess, in a way, like all the time, that like the 3 people, that's been super helpful. But yeah, I remember I'm 2 years older than you. I was 2 years ahead of you. So when you got there, I was a junior and you were a freshman. And I had just gone, well, I guess technically when we started hanging out, I was going through like a really rough time, and God had just taken some people kind of out of my life. Like one of my best friends, his name is Jonah, he was a year older than me, and so he had just started taking all online classes and finishing his degree online, and he was like my guy that I hung out with, and so he left, and then I had some like a little bit of drama and some tea with with another friend, and so we had stopped hanging out, and so I was like all alone, and so God brought us together at like the perfect time. But yeah, accountability, man, that's huge. Just like the phrase is like iron sharpens iron, like that the Bible says, and it doesn't say like, oh, a soft scrubbing tool sharpens iron. It's like, no, like iron sharpens iron. Like you said, like Carson wasn't just a guy who was like, hey, I'm a Christian. He was like, I'm going to make sure I check in with you,
right,
and see how you're doing, and see if you're reading the Bible, and see if you're going to church, and if I hear you say something whack, I'm going to tell you. And that's been kind of the blessing of our friend group in general. Like me, you, and Carson, and now Emily as well, just have that safe, open space where we can like discuss.
Well, and because like it's centered around Jesus too, it's not like, if you call... If you call me out for something, or if Carson calls me out for something, I'm not going to get like mad at you and then just be like not talk to you or whatever. I genuinely like there's just like this there's this known like I'm doing this because to what's the word,
spur you on.
Yeah, to spur you on, because you need this growth, And so I can't stress enough how important that stuff is.
So this is something that I haven't even talked to you about that much, like in person outside of the podcast. But I know at one point you were an accounting major. Am I getting that right?
That's true.
Because that was around the time that we were like just kind of getting to become friends. We hadn't like gotten super tight yet. But you were at one point an accounting major. What led you to switch majors and kind of pursue worship ministry?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, like I said, I was just like a recluse. So I really just did my schoolwork. I read books during class and things like that. And when I was in high school, I took 2 accounting courses, and I was top of the class, like 100s on all the
Nice.
homeworks, on all the tests and things like that. I still remember my accounting teacher because she was lit. So I went to college and I was like, there's money in accounting.
Yeah.
And the school that's literally 2 minutes away from my house offers an accounting, like, it's one of the best accounting degrees in like the South or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, dude, dope, I'll go to college for accounting. But oddly enough, when I came to KWC, what brought me to Kentucky Wesleyan wasn't the accounting. It was our campus minister was like, hey, I want you to come and be a part of our ministry.
Yeah.
We want you to come lead worship. And then also the music department, the choir director, he really just like adopted me before I even got there, because he was like, hey, you come and you audition for choir, and we might be able to give you a scholarship, and we might be able to help you out. And I was like, all right, cool. So I went and I auditioned, and not only him, but whenever I auditioned in front of the entire music staff. And after my audition, I had like the head of the music department come up to me and be like, we need you here at this school. And I was like, whoa.
You're him.
Yeah.
You're him.
And like, I feel like genuinely, like, there are a lot of talented singers. Mm-hmm. I feel like I can carry a tune and I sound good, but I'm nowhere near as good as like Tori Kelly or like Michael Bublé. But it was really encouraging having all those people being like, we need you here. You are valued here. And so having a large campus ministry presence, and then also a music program of people who wanted me there, I felt I was just kind of like called there. So I went in just with a music minor and an accounting major, and then I swapped my sophomore year because I just felt like, I was doing good in accounting. I was, getting good grades and stuff, but what was I doing with my life? Like, during the day, I was hanging out in the campus ministries office with my friends. I was planning worship sets. I was going and leading revivals. I was going I interned at different churches with different like worship internships, just to like feel out these things. And so I was just like, God, like, is this what you want me to do? Like, financially in my mind, I was like, if I go accounting, then I'm chilling. Like, you're always going to need accountants. You're always going to need these. But is that really what I was doing? Like, is that what I was supposed to do with my life? And so I just, like, took a step back. I think it's important for people to, like, take a step back and, like, look at their life. It's like, what makes you happy?
Right.
What are you doing where doors are opening, and are you going through those? And it's like, I looked at it and it's like, yeah, God, you're sending me across town to all these different churches, leading these youth revivals, leading these worship nights, planning these giant events that we combine all these churches together for a night of worship. You're having me do all of these things. What's it in preparation for? Well, I guess that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, if you're equipping me for that, and it's like, what are you doing with accounting? Like, how am I using that to minister to people? It's like, I was going to my class, and I wasn't doing anything with it.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, all right, like, I guess so. I dropped my accounting major. I swapped to a music major with a Christian ministries minor because our campus didn't really have a
worship leading
thing degree. And like, it was even more just like, what's the word? Confirmation. Whenever like I did that, and then everything just started being like falling into place. Because it's like, now I have time to do all of these things that I've been telling people yes to, even though I've been like, one of the things I said is I need to learn how to tell people no. It's because I had all these things going on, and I just kept saying yes, 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 yes. And I kept having to tell to cancel on some people and things like that. But that happened less whenever I was just like committed to this ministry thing. And then when I was in college, I got my first like worship like leadership position, like where I'm the guy, like I'm, you know, like officially paid, I'm the guy thing, my senior year of college. And so it was just really interesting just seeing how everything falls into place after that.
That's heat. It makes me think, I have like a somewhat similar story of just like I showed up as a biology major. And so I really hope somebody out there hears this if you're thinking about the future. I'm just determined. I don't want to be somebody who's 50 years old and like hates going to work every day. Yeah. Like I don't care if I have to live in a one-room apartment. Like I would rather wake up and be like excited to go to work. And so I was my freshman year biology major, and I was hanging out with some of our friends, and our friend, her name was Kate, said, "What are you majoring in, Johnny? Like, by the way, like you haven't talked about it. Like, what are you gonna go do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm majoring in biology." And again, I was just really good at biology in school. My ACT score for science was a 34, which means I missed like 2 or 3 questions or something. Yeah. And so I was just like, well, I'm good at biology. Like, I like it. Like, Punnett squares are fun. I guess I'll just go do like science or something. And I hadn't really thought it through. I just thought like, oh, I don't know, I'll go be like a genetic therapist or something because I like people. I like working at the church. But what I loved doing was working with kids and working at our church camps and signing up for church camps, man, and being a leader and going to volunteer all this church stuff. Like, I just loved being at our church. And so our friend Kate said, well, why are you doing biology? Like, all you ever talk about is the kids stuff. Like, all you ever talk about is camp. Like all you talk about is how bad, like, you can't wait for next summer to do camps again. And she was like, I've never heard you talk about biology once. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then it kind of hit me, and I was like, why am I doing biology? Like, I don't know. I don't want to do biology. Like, I wouldn't mind it, but I was like, what I love to do is ministry, and I have the energy for it. I have the gift for it. So, and then I swapped over. So I would just be thinking about, like, you put it really, really well right there. Like, what are you doing? Like, what do you like to do? And, like, where are the doors opening? Because there are things that, like, we like to do, right? But there just aren't doors. Like, nobody has come up and been like, hey, do you guys want to write an official D&D book or something? It's like, that doesn't happen. Yeah. Like, hey, do you want to be our new The Sentinels Valorant coach? It's like, those doors aren't happening, bro. Those doors aren't opening.
Although, Sentinels, if you're watching.
Those doors just aren't opening. So, but it's like, I had the opportunity already. Like, I had churches, like, you had churches that you were in and involved with, and you knew the right people. I had churches that I was involved in and knew the right people. And so, as soon as I made that commitment, it was just like,
dude,
boom, boom, boom.
I just thought of this too, because it's like, that's why it's so important to take a step back. Because when you take a step back, you realize that, like, what you just realized were just what you thought were hallways that you were just walking through were actually doors that are closed to other people. But they're just open to you, and you're so used to it. It's like, that's how you know where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. I got my first youth internship after I had, like, swapped majors and stuff. Yeah. So keeping it rolling, I know... Oh, so I was going to say, I know we took one worship class together, so we talked about, like, your passion for worship a little bit and kind of where you went. We took one worship class together randomly just because I took
like
every...
the history of worship or something,
I can't even remember. Yeah. Was it? I don't even know.
Worship pedagogy? I don't know.
It was something...
It was
I remember we talked about, like, what a worship pastor should do, and I was in there just kind of, like, vibing because I knew I was going to be in youth ministry, but I was like, all right, like, I'll listen. But I took just about every Christian class at our school I could, and that was just one that was available, so I took it. We were in there together, and we talked a little bit about this, but just, like, in your own words, like, what is the purpose of us, like, singing or worshiping together at a church service on Sunday? Like, why do we do that in the first place?
Okay, so this is really interesting, because, like, this is, like, the things that I geek out on. Mm-hmm. So, I have, like, a theological answer, and then I have, like, a historical answer. Okay. Which do you want first? I'll give them both.
Give me historical first.
Okay, so...
I'm a legitimate person, so...
Very early on, like... in the church, how this is like before the printing press, before things like that. How do you pass along scriptures? How do you, how do you get people to remember the word of God? Well, you chant them. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot of Gregorian chant early on, and like people would just come together and chant songs. Yeah, they just kind of make up melodies for lines of text. And that way you get them in people's brains. Like, you know how you get songs stuck in your head?
Yeah, it's like, I can't tell you what letter comes after M unless I sing the alphabet. Like, I have to do the tune.
Yeah. And so the church early on stuck onto that, and it's like, well, if we use music, then we can remember things. Mm-hmm. And then those things keep going in our heads, and that's good you keep thinking of the word in your head, and that's still true today. Like, what's better if you get, what's a word like "yes I will" stuck in your head and you're singing that all day, and that's your prayer literally all day, or if you're singing "ain't got no tears left to cry," like just something dumb like that. Like, what's better to have in your brain? And so, but it was just a way for people to like remember scripture and things like that. But it's also biblical, because like the Psalms are literally just a book of songs, and so kind of like leaning into like the theological aspect of it is it's like, if God is so like good and almighty and everything, like why wouldn't we worship him? And well, what does worship mean? Like, there's many different ways to worship. Like, you can worship through song. You can worship through... In college, I met this girl named Kobe. She could write poems like no one's business. And she would write these like, what do you call them? Like...
Spoken words.
Spoken words that were just amazing. That's a form of worship. You can worship through dance. You can worship through, like, just all these things. And so, why we sing on Sunday morning is not only is it like biblical, but also it's what's the word?
Like unifying in a way.
Unifying, but like we get to, you know what I'm saying? Right. Like, so we went to we led a youth camp recently, and our friend Cody said this before the worship set, and I think this hits. He said, imagine if Jesus was here right now, like standing on this stage. How would you sing to him? And I was like, that's facts. Like, dude, are you just going to stand there and sit there?
When Cody was on here, I was like, I'm about to start putting some fire emojis.
Like, are you just going to stand there and just, Waymaker, miracle? Or are you going to be bowing down on your knees because, like, he is Jesus. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just like, I don't know. I'm bad at explaining things, but
it makes sense. Like, we get to worship. Like, it's not like we have to. Like, some people get caught up in the idea of like, oh, like we go to church, we sing
3 songs.
But it's like, no, like you have the ability to worship like a person who is so holy that like in the Bible, every time he like pops up to someone or tries to talk to them, they immediately look away and they're like, please don't get near me. Like, I'm so sorry, because like he's so set apart, but like you get to worship him. Yeah. And he hears it and he loves it. Dude, like that's awesome. It's like, imagine if you had a one-way like line to your favorite celebrity. You wouldn't be like, oh, I have to call my favorite celebrity. You'd be like, dude, I get to talk with this celebrity. Yep. It's like, you get to do that. And we all get to do it together on a Sunday morning.
Is it... I'm trying to think of the passage in Isaiah. It's the one that we studied while we were in that...
Is it 6:8? Where he's like, he gets taken up there and he, like, that's where he says...
I am of unclean lips. Or unclean... And it's like... It's like, God is so holy, he can't even look at him. Yeah. And it's just like...
I'll put that on screen right here.
We get to worship him, and we get to do that communally as well. Like, we don't just do that alone, although we can, and there's power in that, but we get to do it with other people, other like-minded Christians. There's power in that too, so... Yeah. It's a long-winded answer.
Backing up slightly, so I was going to ask you, what's the biggest thing you feel like you've learned from experience rather than in the classroom? Like, I've always said, especially with youth ministry, it's a little bit more obvious. Like, you can take as many notes as you can, but when you get into a room with kids, it's like, you have to have experience. Like, that's the only thing that's going to prepare you for it. Same thing with, like, you could study as many battlefields as you wanted, but going to war is a whole different thing. So, you obviously, again, were a music major, but what's one thing you feel like you've learned the most from experience rather than just in the classroom?
I think, kind of like going with your youth thing, like, again, I'm an introvert. Mm-hmm. I like being, alone or whatever. But, like, people. Like, as weird of an answer that is, it's like, ministry is people.
Right.
Like, it's not like if you have, like, a career in ministry, I guess, but there's no people, then you don't have a career.
Yeah.
Because like, and you're not doing anything. Because you need people. Well, how do you relate to them? How do you, this is, as weird as this, how do you talk to them? How do you develop relationships? How do you, do all of these things? It's like, you don't know how to do that until you're actually out there, because it's like, sure, you're in high school, you're in, public schools, and like you're learning how to like relate to people and make friends, but that's all secular. How do you do that with Christ in mind? And it's such a different thing, but like once you figure it out, it's like you make some of the greatest friendships of your life with the people that are entrusting you to minister to them.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, I think the average person doesn't think about like being a worship pastor. They see it as just like, oh, you're the music guy. It's like, well, to a degree, but you're still a minister. Like people still look up to you. Like especially like if you go to a church with little kids, on Sundays we always have little kids that are like tapping along to the beat or something. And it's like those kids think you're a superstar, and you're not supposed to be up there performing, but like in their eyes, you're still just like the guy. And so you still have a job of like people looking up to you, and you can still have people say like, hey, that song today really hit me. Or like maybe you do a new song, like, dude, like what was that song? Like I need to go listen to that one. It's like that's part of your job. Like you just ministered to that person because you prayerfully considered, hey, what should I sing today? You felt like a song was spiritually like accurate, maybe with the message, or you were just feeling it. You were in prayer and you felt like God put it on your heart to do a song, and then someone out there was affected by it. It's like you just ministered to them. And so it's more than just like, I don't know, just playing a song on Sunday and trying to sound good. It's like it's a ministry.
Yeah,
that's a good
way
answer.
More than that.
So I asked you what's important. So why is it important? This actually transitions as well. Why is it important for a worship leader to lead and take seriously how they lead the church in worship? Which we kind of just touched on, but like...
Yeah. I mean, so you kind of touched on it. This was something I think I knew going into college, but I didn't know how to apply. But it's like, worship is not a performance. And it's... You're supposed to be leading people. My dad always says, you can't lead people to a place you're not willing to go yourself.
Yeah.
And like there's so much truth in that. And if you're focused on it being a performance or being, like the very best that it could be, we're not going anywhere. And so it's just important that you have that mindset. Like I know someone who had the opposite mindset of, this is a performance, it needs to be perfect. And I remember like just like an hour before a worship night just canceling it or canceling half of a set because it wasn't perfect or it wasn't, top notch, it wasn't presentable. It's like, we're not presenting it to them.
Yeah.
We are presenting it to him. And so it's like, it doesn't matter if it sounds good to them. And so that was just like, that's just something that I feel like a lot of people don't really understand, which I'll go into like my gripe of the modern church.
Yep.
But it's like, today, what do people look for when they go to a new church? The music.
Yeah.
It's like, is the music good? Is it the type of music I like? Is it old hymns or is it contemporary? Is it this? Do they have 3 instruments on stage? Do they have only a piano? Do they have good singers? Do they have bad singers? How many
fog machines do they have?
Yeah. Are there crazy lights on stage? It's like, that's not the point of going to church.
Yeah.
Worship is just something we do at church. And so it's just like, if that's what you're looking for in a church, I don't know, like you're
gonna end up somewhere you shouldn't be.
Yeah. And then if that's like the focus of a church too, which is, hey, we need to make sure that the music is top notch, all of this is top, everything is so good, they might suffer theologically, they might suffer in relationships, because they're just they're kicking people out because they're not good enough for and these things. It's like, that's not the point of church. And so I just think I forget what the question was, but
Why is it important for a worship leader to lead and take seriously how they lead the church?
So like, I mean, it's important because you have to balance. Like, don't get me wrong, I like my music to sound good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm what's the word? I'm overcritical on myself a lot because I feel like, oh gosh, my voice cracked during that song, or I messed up that note on the piano, or all this stuff. But it's like, in the end, like, no one's gonna remember that in the congregation.
Yeah.
And we're all singing to God, so it's like, does it really matter? You know what I'm saying? But you do have to like find the balance of like, okay, we like this needs to be singable with people, Yeah. And so it's just it's an important role to play.
I definitely. Me and Carson remember when you mess up.
That's true.
there was
you guys sit in the front row.
That was the best day ever, man. Was when you were playing piano. Your dad was finishing up the sermon, and you were playing like the background, and you botched a note, and it wouldn't have even been that funny. Like, it would have been whatever. But you looked up at us, that's what made it funny.
I did.
And so I'll zoom in on my face here for the visual listeners. But like, Matt plays the piano, he hits the wrong note, and he literally goes, and just like peeps over at us, dude, and we lost it. But that's fun. But I agree. It's like something I said one time in my preparation sermon, which is on this channel, is just like you should be moving with a purpose.
Yeah.
And so I think about, like you said, like, I like my stuff to sound good, and that means it's not a bad thing.
Yeah,
if you
it's
try
not.
to make something sound good. Like, if your piano is missing 7 keys, it's not a bad thing for you to be like, maybe we should get a real piano.
Yeah.
But you should have to keep in mind, why are you doing it? Like, what is the purpose you're moving?
Don't lose sight of it.
Yeah,
because if you lose sight of it, then you're not.
Yeah.
You're not going.
You're not
somewhere.
getting the new piano because you want it to sound good. You're getting the new piano because you want the environment to be like conducive or welcoming to
the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's kind of been the purpose why, even since I've been at this church, one of the first things we did was upgrade a lot of our equipment. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, did we need to do that? Not really, but kind of. Mm-hmm. Because, I got here right after COVID. We still have a lot of people at home. We're not able to live stream. Okay, well, let's get some stuff that we can live stream to them. Okay, well, let's get some stuff that maybe makes it sound a little bit better to them so that they can feel more involved. Okay, well, maybe let's upgrade a little bit of these things. And then God also just put the people in the place to make it happen, which is how like, if God is, like, moving and, like moving in that area, then like, okay, maybe we can, step out a little bit here. And so
looking where the fruit's at.
Yeah, look where the fruit's at.
So this transitions really perfectly into like what I was going to ask you next is, let's say maybe somebody who just graduated high school, I'm going to college, or maybe I just graduated college and I'm on my own for the first time, or whatever it is, whatever phase of life you're in. But let's say I'm looking for a church. Mm-hmm. What's something that I should be looking for in a new church? And maybe what's something that like we talked about, we shouldn't be looking for was like a specific kind of worship. Like when you're going to a new church, what's something you should be looking for, you think?
The people.
The people.
Because a church is the people. Mm-hmm. And if you're just thinking about going to church just to go on Sunday mornings, well, then I guess you could go wherever you want because you're never going to do anything more.
Yeah.
But if you actually are looking for a church, to go to a church, to be a member, to be a part of that church, well then, do you get along with the people? Mm-hmm. Do you agree with, what the pastor's preaching? Like, because, in the end, like, a church isn't just Sunday morning. Like, there's Wednesday night Bible studies. Mm-hmm. There's, what are the word? Potlucks. There's, fundraisers and, all, like, community projects and all of these things. Do you want, do you want to be a part of that? And do you want to be a part of it with those people? It's like, a church is a family in the end. And so it's like, and you can tell a lot about a church who, like, when everyone goes, sits down on Sunday morning, and then everyone leaves, and no one talks to each other. But if you go to a church on Sunday morning, and the pastor can't get everyone to sit down because they're all talking to each other, mm-hmm. and the pastor keeps on, or starts, like, talking to and doing the announcements or whatever, and people are still up talking and shaking hands and giving hugs, it's
there's
like
children running around.
Yeah, that's gonna, that people there are friendly, that they're gonna be welcoming.
There was a woman that I talked to one time while I was working at that shake and tea place I worked at. It was like a shake and tea bar, so I made this woman her shake, and we were talking about where she went to church, and it was like a really big church, which nothing against like really big churches. Again, it's just all about like the purpose. You know, is your church really big because you just are getting as many people as you can to come, or is your church really big because I mean God's really moving? But anyway, she went to a really big church and she said that she liked it because she felt like she could walk in on a Sunday, listen to the sermon, and then leave, and then nobody had to talk to her or nobody was going to ask her to do anything. And I was like, then why do you even go? Like, why would you even go to church if your goal is to just show up and leave?
Just watch it online.
You could just watch it online. And then you get into this like spiral, in my opinion, of you could be like, yeah, if you're just going to watch it online anyway, you could probably just catch like the TikTok highlights like afterwards. Just catch like the couple one-liners your pastor said. And then you know what? You could probably just get it in meme form and just like get like get like the picture of like your pastor doing this, like pointing his finger, and then have like the quote at the bottom. And at that point, it's like, again, just why would you even go? Like, you're missing the whole point of church. And something I said, too, that you said perfectly, just like the people, is like, I think of church, the church family being a good, like, such a good term, because I always say, like, that church is going to be your home, especially if you're in ministry and you're looking at what church you're going to work at, rather than just take the first church that hires you. Like I always say, you should go and just, if that church is a good, godly church, they're going to understand you saying, like, hey, I know you want to have me, but, like, give me a couple weeks to see if I feel the vibe at your church, because that church is about to be your second home. Yeah. And that means home is the place you're going to go when you're crying, when you're sad, when you're tired, when you're mad, when you're happy. Any emotion, like, you're going to be at the church. And so...
And again, when you feel those emotions, you're going to be around the people who are going to be there to comfort you. Yeah. So are you okay with that?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not just like... You don't get to just walk in on Sunday, like, again, walking in on Sunday and leaving, but thinking about, like, those emotions... Like, you don't get to pick... I don't know where I was going with that, to be honest. But I just say it's your home. Like, like wherever you're at, like, once you're committed to that church... This is what I was going to say. Once you've committed to that church, it's like you're stuck there. Like, if you were to leave all of a sudden, that's, like, hurting your ministry to those people because you had already committed. But it's also, like, hurting your own faith. Like, you're just, like, hurting your own credibility in a way if you, like, church hop. And so once you make that commitment, like, if you're looking for churches, you don't want to just say, oh, yeah, like, I'll go to this church because... those people, like, if you're, like, cool being around those people on a Sunday and you're like, oh, yeah, this is cool, I can do it for, like, this Sunday, and you're in a good mood, well, are you going to be still going to that church 3 months from now when you're in a bad mood? 6 months from now? Because it's easy to say, oh, like, this church, like, it has some stuff that I'm not a fan of, but I can tolerate it. Can you tolerate it for 2 months? Can you tolerate it for 6 months? Can you tolerate it for a year? Like, you should be thinking long-term with churches, not short-term. I think... the best way to look at it is like, okay, I can be here when I'm happy, but could I be here if I was sad? Like, if I just had the worst day of my life, could I walk into this church and be chill? Or is it one of those things where, like, I walk in and, on a good day, I don't care that that old guy said something mean to me, or I don't care that the pastor's not all there, but it's like, on your worst day, when you really feel like you need to be fed, if you walk in, like, on that day, could you go to this church? Yeah. That's what I would say. That's heat. Got a little bit more. What are we at? 39? Oh, dude, we got plenty of time.
I'm chilling.
So kind of the same thing I said, what if I'm looking for a church to serve in? I would just say that, like you just definitely need to test out the church, man. I would think it would be wild if a church was just like, you have to say yes or no right now. Like, they should give you a little grace period, like a couple weeks to see, like, hey, come meet the people at our church, meet the families. People was a good answer. That was a great answer. Just people. So finally, if we have time, which we do, I was going to ask something that me and Cody talked about a lot. If you've been listening to the podcast so far, Cody and I talked a lot about, like, nerd stuff. Like, we're two people who... Yep. And it's weird to even use the term nerd stuff now. It's just a quicker way to get people to understand what we're talking about. Yeah. Because a lot of this stuff is somewhat considered, like,
pop
cool now. Yeah, it's not even necessarily nerd stuff. Yep. But you and I, like, we play video games, we watch fantasy movies. Yep. We play D&D. But some people who are in the church with a capital C, like, some people who call themselves Christian would heavily frown upon things like that, whether it be just video games in general, specific video games, certain board games, Dungeons and Dragons, like watching Harry Potter or something. We all hear about those kids that we went to school with that couldn't watch Harry Potter, just stuff like that. People frown on that stuff, but I mean, you and I are two leaders in our church, and we do those things. So without having to have the whole discussion again that Cody and I kind of had, just like in your own life, like, what are some fruits you've seen come from the fact that you're a nerd?
My relationship with you, firstly, because, like, I mean, I got to know you through playing D&D. Yeah. You know, there's, like, I feel like there's a lot, like, it's just another avenue to, like, relate to people, I guess. and to do stuff with them. Like I personally, I hate sports. I'm not a big fan of sports.
Yeah.
But like, that's like what every Alabama middle-aged man does with his church homies. They just go and they say, let's go watch football tonight. And then they'll have these big parties of people over, and it's like, that's how they socialize and gather. It's like, well, how am I supposed to do that if I don't like that?
Yeah.
Hey, we could watch fantasy movies. We could, paint little miniatures and, put them on the table and roll some dice. It's like, that sounds awesome. And so, I don't know, it's just another way to like relate to people and to have fun with them, to connect with them. It's like, because that's another thing too, is people aren't going to let you in. Like, if you're in ministry, people aren't going to let you in until they know that you're genuine.
Yeah.
And that you're authentic. Because, like, why would you want to let in a liar? And so it's like, if you're just genuine with people and you're like, hey, this is what I like to do, and we can have fun doing this, well, then they might be a little more open, to tell you, hey, this is where I'm struggling in my life. And you can use that as a tool to just be like, hey, well, maybe this is going on. Hey, why don't we go over here and, get that off your mind, have some fun. Or why don't we go, play a game real quick, or just do something. But it just provides an avenue to just relate and connect with people. Like you can play D&D with people. You can, have big paint parties. You can have board game nights. You can watch new movies that come out that are like fantasy themed, like Dune when that came out. I forced all y'all to watch it with me, but like it's it's just like an avenue that you can use, just every other thing in life. Like other people use football, or other people use cooking. I don't know, like
I know like in youth for me, like we have students who are into that stuff. Like they play video games. They're teens. Like they play video games. They play board games and stuff. And so it's cool to have Matthew as like the special celebrity guest sometimes who also does that stuff. And so it's just like Matthew's another person that I can know my kids are looking up to, and he can go, like, if one of my kids says, like, hey, I'm going to go play board games or something, I'm playing with Matthew. It's like, oh, cool. Like, Matthew's a great person for them to be playing board games with, because we're not just talking about board games. Like, if you've ever played a board game or watched a movie or whatever, it's not like you watch the movie and say, that was a good movie, I am leaving now. It's like, you're going to have conversations and things. Yeah. And so who would I want them to be hanging out with and having conversations with? Like, Matthew's a great example.
Yeah, that's a great point. I had a thought while you were saying that.
Well, I'll keep going. Maybe I'll trigger it. Because I was going to say, too, like, you have, like, we've had moments, me and Matthew, where we'll be, because, like, we'll play video games together, and you have a lot easier of a time talking to people online, like, than I do, which is really weird, because I'm so extroverted in person.
Yeah,
but,
like, I feel like we're the opposite.
Yeah, online I feel so uncomfortable just talking to people that, like, I don't know.
I'm the exact opposite. I could talk to them all day.
Matthew's built, like, almost like a little community of just people that he's met online, and we'll have, and some of them we've, like, to a degree known in person, but we like the other day we were literally like listening to a sermon, me and Matthew, in Discord, which is like, if you don't know, if you're a boomer, Discord is like, we basically have like a channel, and anybody who clicks on that channel can hop in and talk to me and Matthew at any time, basically, because me and Matthew were in a thing
already. Think like Skype.
Yeah, think like Skype. Or like, imagine if you just had a Zoom call, but every one of your friends who was on your friends list could see that you were in a Zoom call with somebody.
Yeah.
If they wanted to jump in, they could. And so me and Matthew were literally like listening to a sermon. Oh, we just had pizza. I'm burping, I'm feeling it. We were basically listening to a sermon, and then we had like a bunch of friends just like randomly join, and they were like, yo, like, what are y'all doing? And we were like, oh, we're listening to a sermon, like, our bad, like, we're probably going to keep listening to it. Y'all cool with it? And they were just like, yeah, why not? And then we have 3 people who probably haven't been to church in a long time listening to a sermon just because they're friends with me and Matthew because we played games together. Just stuff like that. Like, there's countless examples of just moments where we've been able to spend time with people, whether in our own church or people who maybe don't go to a church at all, maybe they don't necessarily believe, but because we do these things that they do, because we relate to them, we've been able to have these types of conversations or just lead by example in some way.
So I thought of what I was going to say.
Nice.
Because you kind of mentioned about, like, you have, like, youth members who kind of, like, are also interested in the same thing or things like that. It's like we live in a world where it's, like, it's so saturated by worldliness, if that makes sense, that it's, like, if we provide's not the right word, but if like, I am someone who, like, let's say, streams on Twitch
Mhm.
and I play games or whatever, it's like you as like a parent of a Christian kid who's interested in those things, like you have to know that like most Twitch streamers are not going to be clean.
Right.
They're going to be out there cursing. They're going to be out there doing all these things and hyping up things that might not be the best. But because I'm a Christian and that I have like good values, that in a way like you're fine, I guess, with like your kid watching me, for instance, over
Right.
that. And so it's just like we're providing light in a dark place for people to go to. And so
that's a perfect way to say it, because you think about that specific scenario. Like, let's say you're a parent and you kind of get the vibe that like your kid's watching some stuff that maybe you're not cool with on that kind of platform. It's like, how rebellious do you think your kid's going to be if you're like, you know what, you just can't use this at all anymore. I'm banning the whole thing. Like, imagine if you were like a parent and you were like, you know what, I'm banning board games as a whole. Like, you can't do any of this. It's like that stuff's going to cause like more rebellion in a way. Like, we know people that have had parents like that were just like, you have to live in a box and you have to wear these types of clothes and you're not allowed to talk to people who look like like all this stuff. And it's like they grow up, they finally get those rules taken away because they're 18, they're independent, and they go buck wild. Why? Because you like forced them to live a certain way that they didn't want to live.
You didn't give them time to figure out for themselves what's good and bad.
And so instead of just like putting someone in a box or stripping away and saying like, you can't do anything like this, you say, hey, like you can do that if you're doing it again for the right purpose.
Right.
Like if you're watching people play games and you enjoy that, if you want to play board games and stuff, it's like, well, you should be watching someone like Matthew, or if you're going to play a board game, or just stuff like that. Like you can take anything. Like Paul says it best in Romans 14:14, where he says nothing is inherently evil on its own. There's like God created everything and he said it was good. Let's just start there. We just start from the basics.
Yeah.
Everything that God made, he said was good. It's what we do with it that can make something bad. Like a knife. Knives cut food. Knives cut food, that's good. What could someone do with that knife, though? They could do bad with it. Well, dude, I think that about wraps it up. I think we nailed it. I just think there's... Anytime you, like, shun something, like, you're getting closer to, like, being Amish in a way. It's just like... you're closing out so many ministry opportunities. Like, we're called to tell all people about the gospel. And how do you think you're going to best be able to bring someone to Christ if they're doing something...
If you don't meet them where they are.
Yeah, if you don't meet them where they are,
what did
you don't
Jesus
relate
do?
to them. Yeah.
He met them.
Yeah. It'd be a lot easier. Like Paul says, I've become all things to all people, so that by doing so I may save some. It doesn't say, I became most things to most people, but people who are doing weird stuff, I didn't like that and I wasn't doing that. Where did my camera go? You know what? That's just a sign. We're going to wrap it up. We're going to wrap it up. Hey, if you're in audio, that didn't affect you at all, but the camera's gone. All right, yeah.
Well,
that's
thanks
just
everyone
God
for watching.
shutting us up.
He's like, guys, we need to cut
it's
this
too
right
long.
now.
People are going to fall asleep. Well, I appreciate you clicking on this.
Check out my podcast. I do a fantasy book club
out.
podcast. It's called The Tome Travelers. There'll be a link in the description.
I'll put a link in the description also to his Twitch channel. So if you do have that kid, if you're that parent, you can have Matt.
Because again, I'm a cracked Valorant player.
Yeah, cracked Valorant player, Christian. So yeah, all right, we're gonna get out of here.
Thank you all.
Shout out Elgato, sponsor.